3 projects to add to your resume. If you're new around here, my name is Rayyan Siddiqui, and in this video, I'll be sharing 3 projects that you can add to your software engineering resumes. Now, projects are essential, not only for your learning. Now, as a software engineer, most of your learning happens while making stuff. Watching YouTube videos, like reading programming books is cool and all, but most of your learning happens working on actual practical projects. Now, with projects, not only does it give you that learning experience, it also gives you something to talk about in your interviews. So when you're giving an interview, almost all software engineering interviews have a behavioral component. Now, that behavioral type of component is just a question answer session where the interviewer is just asking you questions and you're trying to answer it from your past experiences. Majority of the time, they'll ask you questions related to some of the stuff you worked on. They'll ask you share a time you came up with a solution of a complex problem in one of your projects, so stuff like that. So projects really help with having that accumulation of experience so you can talk about that in your interviews. And as well, to get to that interview, you need projects to showcase your skills in your resume so you can get selected for those interviews. So the first project that I have for you guys is focus on creating API related projects. Now, these are projects. Now, when I say project, I mean an app, a game, or a website. Now, this is something which another person can see, they can look at. So create a portfolio first of all, and then document all this stuff in your portfolio, all these projects, all the stuff that you work on. So create an app, whatever you're most comfortable with, create an app with Kotlin or with React Native, create a cross-platform app, or maybe create a website that showcases your solutions to a problem, or maybe create a game. Games are super best. I really love game projects, and I'm going to talk about that later in the video. But focus on creating an API related project. So have a project, for example, one of my projects in my resume has a Google Maps API embedded in it, as well as a weather API. So try to come up with an idea of a project where you can embed any type of API in it. Those are really helpful, and those give you good experience to talk about in your resumes. The second project idea I have is an open source library. Now, this is super, super important, because I feel if you can create, so say mobile apps, for example, so try to create a library for mobile apps, an open source library. That can give you a lot of experience, just personally creating it, and also to talk about in your interviews. Because open source, companies love open source projects. And open source, if you can get some people to who use that stuff as well, it can give you a lot of experience in the software engineering realm. So focus on creating a type of library, just create a super simple library. Say you're creating a library for Android, hosted on Maven, or a React Native or React library hosted on NPM. So try to focus on creating an open source project, a project that other developers can use in their projects. So try to think along those lines. The third project you can create, which is a game. Now, games, I personally am a big fan of game projects. Try to think of a unique game. So any famous game that you play, try to make a clone of that. Now, I say games because of getting more exposure to learning or coming up with solutions to different complex problems. In my resume, for example, I had a multiplayer game. Now, multiplayer games are great. Not only do they give you experience with networking and so on, they also teach you a lot about customer-facing projects. You thinking about the customer as you create a project. That is crucial in an interview. Interviewers are really impressed if you can portray the skill that you are customer driven, that you think about customer psychology, customer experience, and then you embed whatever features you're creating or implement whatever features you're creating in your application. So try to think along those lines as well. And this was a super short video. I didn't give off any specific ideas, but just general themes that you can use to create your apps or whatever, or games or websites, whatever you're creating within. So first was an API based, any API based project. Try to use any type of famous API like IMBD or a Google Maps API in your applications. Try to use that, come up with an idea. Or you don't even have to come up with an original idea. Just try to make a clone of any of the famous one. For example, one project I had in my resume was an app using the Google Maps API where you can set it to any location in a map, and then if your phone enters that location, it would automatically set it to silent mode. So say you're entering a library, you can pin that on your phone, and if you enter that library, if you enter a 50-meter radius of that library, your phone will be set to silent, and if you exit that area, it will be set to whatever volume setting you had before. So that was one project I had using an API. The second thing I want you guys to focus on is an open source library project. So whatever framework that you currently work with, whether that's Android, whether that's React, React Native, or even iOS, or even a game or Unity, like try to create something open source, something that other developers can use in their projects. That's really good. That gives you good experience. That gives you something to talk about in your interviews. The third thing which I want you to do is create a game. Now this doesn't necessarily have to be like a game, like a Unity game. Maybe create like a text-based game or anything where you're trying to think about the customer, like think about the customer as you make that project. Now, obviously that this is super broad, like you can create any type of game. My recommendation is just whatever you're currently playing, just try to create a clone of that. That'll give you good experience to talk about in your interviews. So those are my quick 3 ideas, what themes you can use to create your software engineering project. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this video. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.